Hey guys, welcome down here to Tampa. We're in the Rack Steels. We got Gheri Hicks on us, lawyer, but we old school, so we always say Esquire because that's back in the day on the old English side. Hey Mike G, how's it going today, man?
Can't complain. Got another great guest as always, and that's how we do.
So Gheri, how are you doing today? How's your day going?
I am doing well. I am highly caffeinated and ready to hang out with you guys.
Awesome. So, I love the fact that you're a lawyer because I got a history degree and I thought about becoming a lawyer, but then I realized I'd had to do another 4 years. And I was like, you know what? I'm ready to tap out. Yeah. So what kind of law do you do and how do you help people?
I do estate planning and probate and a little bit of real estate. And so that means nothing to the average person. So what that looks like is I help people create a legacy. We look at your assets. We create a plan for how you transition those assets from you to the next generation, as well as dealing with when someone's passed on. So you might hear that talked about with doing wills, with doing probate, or transferring property. But I like to say I help people create legacies.
All right. Right, because we all need them. And, and a lot of generations go by and they don't have a legacy.
Absolutely.
And, because they don't have things tied to different things. Now, where'd you grow up and how did you end up? Are you in Florida now, right?
Yes.
All right. So how did you get down to Florida and where are you originally from? Because you're not originally from Florida.
Well, I don't know who told you that part.
I'm trying to figure out because I read your bio. You had Texas out there.
I did. Okay. So people don't believe this, but I am literally from Plant City, Florida. Born and raised several generations back, right? The house I grew up in is the house my mom grew up in, is the house her dad built. So it is born and raised deep Plant City, deep Florida. And so I got to move a couple of different places. I've been to Texas, I've been to Japan, but I came back a little bit over to the west. I'm still near Plant City, so Florida's my home.
So you homegrown Floridian. All right, my bad. I'll take a hit on that one. All right, so you got into estate law when you decided to go to law school. What made you? Because back in the day, I'm not going to date you on age or anything because I know I'm already old. But everyone was doing corporate law in the '80s and going into the '90s. It was the thing, corporate law, right. And then then it became a little bit civil law, and then people started kind of migrating into different branches of law. But you really don't hear a lot of people talk about estate law.
Right. So
and why is that?
Well, it's a combination of things. Nobody wants to talk about death or dying, so that's just not something we do. The other piece is people just think it's only for the wealthy, right? So I didn't start off wanting to do estate planning. I wanted to be a local government lawyer. I flirted with, being a lawyer for the military for a couple years, and then I ended up doing some stuff to help poor people at legal aid. Over the course of that time, life happens. I did all the things. And then I had a friend of mine who passed away and she was younger than me. And that situation really made me become more aware of the need for us to have a plan. So about 5-6 years ago, I just said, let's do this. There's a lot of single moms out there leaving kids without a plan. There's a lot of folks in general leaving this earth without a plan, thinking their families are going to be okay for it. So that's how I transitioned into estate planning, because there's a need there for average people who don't have a ton of wealth, who do have a family that they care about, who do want to leave something, even if that is just your values and your morals. But we want to create a plan for that and the $10 you got in the bank.
Oh, Mike, you got something? I keep messing up.
No. It's true. It's true what you said. The $10 you leave in there, because I've seen a lot of people pass, but they leave nothing. Then you got to come out of your own pocket to bury them. Then you got to know what to do with their stuff. So yeah, that's very important legal practice that many people don't think is important.
Right.
So very good.
Right.
So, Gheri, one of the challenges we have in today's 21st century, and I have to touch on it, is, all right, let's talk about, blended families, because
absolutely
about 50 years ago, that was the minority. Mm-hmm. And then when we got into the 70s and we got into, free love, feminism, and everybody know their truth, it caused a catechism of multiple families being blended, or men having multiple, and I'm sorry, but I'm going with the majority here, so don't nobody cancel me. A majority of men in certain neighborhoods having multiple kids with different women, and then you have one estate for this guy, and he dies and he has no will.
Right.
That seems to be a big challenge. And just give me some background on how do you guys deal with that? How do you kind of circumvent all that?
Yeah.
I said some of the bad planning on some people's part.
Yeah. Well, this is one of those where failure to plan is a plan to fail, as they say. Blended families is a hotbed of issues. Again, I don't always come at it from the perspective of how much money do you have, but from the perspective of what kind of devastation are you going to leave your family. So if you have multiple children with different women, or vice versa for the women, you need a plan on how do we get that child the opportunity to talk about your last and dying wishes? Do they get to come to the hospital? Do they get to come to the funeral? Do they get to have a voice at all in your final days or hours of life? And especially if there's some kind of turmoil or issue between them, do you want to make peace with them? So that's part of that plan. But one of the things that I deal with a lot for blended families, and typically this is on remarriage, is you can unintentionally disinherit the children from outside of the marriage. So
Whoa.
Think about it. When you get married, you say, hey, spouse, I really want to provide for you. Then I like you, but I got these kids over here. And so when I pass away, my spouse gets all of my stuff. And if I don't have a plan, then she gets all of the stuff, because yes, men typically die first. And then she goes on and lives her life. And then when she passes away, who gets her stuff? Her kids.
Her kids.
Absolutely. Or her new husband. We'll go with it.
Go with it.
Right? But what that means is the children from that first spouse to die, they have nothing. That's been used up by the surviving spouse. That is very common, and it happens unintentionally. So now you add bad blood to, whatever else was happening. Now, that woman took all my daddy's money, and there you go.
All right, So I got two scenarios for you. And I'm using no names today.
No names.
I got a disclaimer
Okay.
of no names. All right. So one was an individual, very near and dear, had a blended family with different people. Mm-hmm. His last wife had a house that she lived in, but his name was on it. She passed, but there was never no paperwork done transitioning the house out of his name to her name, because the house was already paid off. Mm-hmm. So what ended up happening was when he died, they weren't legally married.
Oh, nice.
So his kids from 2 marriages ago, because he was married 3 times, mm-hmm. come in and say, we want the house.
Yes.
And then they try to kick the old lady out who's been living there like 30 years, 40 years. So the judge comes in and says, no, you can't kick her out because she's been in this house this long. Then her kids roll in and say, well, this is our house. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then another group rolled in, and another individual rolled in that was out of wedlock, comes in and says his house. Mm-hmm. So they ended up having to kind of go to court. And what happened is the house is tied up. She passed away. There's this big $1 million house, because then it's out, on the West Coast, with $1 million house. Nobody's in it, and it's tied up in litigation because they just can't figure out who's going to own the house. So how do you deal with that?
Well, that happens very regularly. Now, maybe not the exact same scenario where you have the husband and wife or not legally married, but what that looks like a lot, especially in back in the day scenarios, well, mom and pop passed away and they didn't have a will, but they had 12 kids. And so all 12 of those kids end up trying to agree on something. And that is a recipe for disaster. So even in that situation, it's hard enough for me to agree by myself with something to do, let alone adding 10 or 12 people to the mix, right?
Right.
Now, and we can talk about being greedy and saying, this child just wanted to come in and kick the old lady out. And I that may be part of it, but I tell you what, you dangle $1 million in front of me, even if it's a tenth of it. I got some feelings about how I want to spend my money, and I can agree with you on how we do that. And so that's the struggle when we talk about houses. And one of the big points for a lot of people, poor people, people of color, and so forth, is your house is your biggest asset. So if we don't figure out a plan for that and it sits in limbo, we lose it for taxes. It's lost because, whatever situation came in, they couldn't pay the mortgage. They couldn't do the
capital gains tax. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's like, I'm preaching to the choir, but that is one of the reasons why estate planning is big for me. We don't want to plan for this after the situation has occurred. If we can see it coming, then let's create a plan. And one of the easiest ways, not always the easiest, but one of the easiest ways, if you don't have a couple $100,000 sitting around, is to get some type of life insurance or get some type of plan that either pays off one of the kids or pays off the house. And then we can go do something more productive than argue and hire lawyers. And so I tell people regularly, you can pay me a couple $1,000s on the probate to handle this, or you can pay me a couple $100 on the front end to do a deed that dresses this better for you. I don't know about your math skills, but mine say a couple $100 is always going to be better than a couple $1,000 plus the litigation and so forth. So that's really one of the big reasons why I want families to start learning and to stop being so afraid of having this quote unquote death conversation, because it's not just about the money. It really does devastate families over this.
I agree. I just to relate on this. That's why people don't call these type of lawyers, because they don't want to sit here and touch because then, what you say, you ain't leaving me nothing, and then they go home and then it becomes a problem.
Yes.
I thought you loved me, man.
Yeah.
And I've seen it a lot. I'm not a lawyer, nothing like that. I'm an IT person, but you're a lawyer. I could imagine the patience you have to have with this craziness.
No. See, and here's the deal. I don't have to have the patience because they don't come to me. Right? So what I have to do is things like this, or I go out in the public and I try to talk to people. And when I go out and talk to people, I say the stories that we hear. And they all, yes, you're right. It is almost like a church choir, because everybody's heard these things before. They know of a situation where so-and-so's kids did whatever, and now they don't talk anymore. And it's a doggone shame how they did their mama. But, I'm a little country.
But most people don't account their assets. And what we found out when my dad passed and he was remarried is that everything defaulted. Now, thank goodness that all of us did very well in life.
Yeah.
So when he passed, he left nobody nothing. He was one of those old school guys from Florida, Gainesville, didn't do a will. So like the kids from the first marriage ended up with zero, which we didn't care. And then everything else defaulted to the spouse he was living with, right, wrong, or indifferent. But the only struggle that we looked at it from an asset standpoint. My dad had a lot of stuff that was not, going to be usable unless somebody went there and did the inventory, rolled the assets up and used it. Right. But it was pretty much like everything was sold, the house was sold, and it was gone. And nobody had any bad blood about it. But I thought about it many years, and I said, man, if we hadn't been so financially secure in our own professions, right, this would have been a catastrophic mess.
Yeah.
And so I think when it comes down to people of color, and I have to say, because I see it more prevalent more than I have since I've gotten older. So it's funny. But in my 20s, didn't think nothing about it. You hear little stories. Now that I'm almost 60 and I see people passing away now, it's just seeing how things have just been percolating over the years with different groups of people, land, houses. And people say, well, he didn't have anything. But when you think about it, he didn't have anything. A person didn't have anything. Not talking about my dad, but other people. There's a car involved. Right. There's asset, jewelry. So when people tell me, oh, they didn't have a house and they were renting. Yeah, but you didn't realize he had a $5,000 Rolex. They're like, so this one of our cousins, I'll leave it at this. They didn't do a will. My cousin was like, my great cousin, she was like one of the few people left around. So when he died, everybody thought he was broke because he stayed in a small house and he had very little assets. He thought he had very little assets. He's an old school guy and he grew up during the Depression. So when he passed away, all the other kids were like, hey, you go to the house, you clean that nasty old house out, you're on your own, we don't care. Well, guess what? He had like $500K in a suitcase in the closet. And he was OCD, and it was perfectly laid out. Well, guess who ended up with the money? She did. And then all of a sudden, everybody It got brand new really quick.
Yes.
So people don't really understand assets. So can you kind of go over what is a viable asset? Because I think that's always a struggle with people, because the only thing you ever hear people think of an asset is a house.
Right.
There's a lot more to this.
Right. So from my perspective, an asset truly at its basic level is just something of value, right? That you can potentially transfer to someone else. So even that Rolex could be an asset. Not necessarily that it's an appreciable asset, right? It may not always be going up in value. Certain things go down in value and so forth. So we think of assets more so. What I deal with is bank accounts, life insurance policies, retirement accounts, even, your houses, and sometimes your cars. Cars, I don't think as much as an asset, just because they are always generally going down in value unless you have some type of vintage car. But even then, I've had clients who say, oh, we have a plane, or we have an RV, or we have all of these things. So there's a plan that needs to happen for each of those things. But the thing is, that's most important when you look at whatever that asset is, you decide where it goes. So I have some folks who will say, I have, a family wedding ring. Now, some family wedding rings might be $500, but it has a sentimental value. Some of them are over $10,000. Right? It's really when you process what this means for that person and those values that you're adding. Because a lot of families, it's all about the memories, and we want to pass that memory on along with that piece of jewelry. We're not insuring it.
You would hope it's always about the memory. Okay.
Well,
I'm gonna go with that one.
Yeah, you're right. You are right. And I mean, there are some times where it is a dollars and cents approach. And I will tell you, I do a lot of probate consultations where I have to say, I'm sorry that I'm coming down to numbers and cents, but this is where you have to decide what's important. Because if your family member only left $3,000 in the bank, and it's going to cost you $3,000 to go get that money, yeah, I don't think that's worth it. Not to, and then you got to spend, 6 months potentially, depending on fighting with family and giving out notices and so forth. So that's all the more reason why whatever your assets are, whatever those things of value are, we create a plan for them. So, and if I could just do my little public service announcement. I appreciate it. Thank you. So bank accounts, anything that says I can put a beneficiary designation on that, bank accounts, life insurance policy, retirement accounts, make sure that's done. Because now we can bypass the lawyers as much as possible and reserve that for only the big stuff. And if somebody's passing away, you want to have checked those beneficiary designations regularly. Maybe not every year, unless you're the type to forget, but every 3 to 5 years, make sure the person's still alive. Make sure that's who you want. They didn't have a health issue. You don't want them to inherit a ton of money, especially if there's somebody with a special need or disability where they're getting governmental benefits. And if you leave them a couple $1,000s, that messes up their benefits. You just did dirt. You just harmed them more than benefited them by doing that. So that's why we just want to have a conversation to think about how we pass those assets. Again, I make light of it, but I do think it's very real. If it's just $10 or if it's 10 million, there's something that you want to create a somewhat of a plan for. We don't have to tell them how to spend it all. We just want to know that it's going to be taken care of when we get there. So I think of it as stewardship. So.
Oh, but you touched on the military, and that you had worked with the military, and it brought something back to me as we talk about this, is the amount of guys that I knew in the military got married very young when they came in the military, like when they were 18 or 19, and they put their first wife on their SGLI, and then they got, or a girlfriend, and then they got divorced. Yeah. I mean, got divorced and they never got remarried, or they ended up with another spouse, but they never went back and changed their original SGLI. And it still exists. And we've seen so many cases that in the last years, because of the war, people were, passing away. And then when the SGLI came up, it was going to the ex-wife, not the current wife. And we were like, what is going on? And by law, she gets the 300,000 or she gets the 100,000, not the wife you're current to. So it is very important for people to make sure they update their stuff.
Absolutely.
Now, so like when I got remarried, I took out a bunch of life insurance and a bunch of other policies, and I put one in each kid's name. So that way, all the assets that sit in one area for my wife, they're fenced off for her, and each kid has a certain amount of money that they walk away cash on the barrel.
Absolutely.
So everybody is, good to go, because I've already seen, and I had to say it just from my own neighborhood, the devastation it does to a family when someone passes away and they don't have a will.
Yeah.
It's madness.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I just commend you, Vince, in that, because I think the part is when you say you've gotten those policies for the kids, here's what you just said. We don't have to wait for your wife to pass away for us to get ours. So, and I hate to look at it in terms of the money, but it's like, there may create some tension with the current wife because, well, how much of my money is she spending? Like, does she really need that?
Oh, that question's going to come up. She ain't going to be around that long anyway.
Exactly. I'm not saying anything bad about your kids, but I think that's human nature, where we all just kind of start to look a little bit more suspiciously when somebody's spending a little bit extra, and when they've passed on, now I get my piece. So I think if as much as I can, I encourage people to do that, because that's part of the plan. That's how you keep a relationship nice between them, if they already have a really good relationship and the others aren't waiting for the other one to die or giving them the side eye, whatever that looks like. But
so I have a question. Do you, because I don't have a life insurance. I'll be honest with you, I'm guilty.
No,
I got a Roth
fine.
IRA for my son, and I got a Roth IRA, right there, that's for him.
Yeah.
His name, that's it, Papa. Right?
Oh, how old's your son? Sorry, I got to interrupt you.
17.
Okay, he better make it to 18 or we got problems.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, we don't do minors for naming them as beneficiaries. There's your free advice. Keep going.
But when I do get my life insurance together, which I'm, right now it's final. Yeah, I got to do this. I want so you think is a paycheck cut or just a monthly allowance? Is that better? Because I want to do him a monthly allowance so nobody can take him, and it's directly to him for 20 years and so forth. Is that a good idea as a professional standpoint?
So you're actually asking me two different questions, but that's okay. I'll break it down. So the financial institution is generally going to just cut a check and say we're done with this. So when the person passes away. So I don't have a problem with you ever cutting a check to someone as long as you say they're responsible. I trust their decision making. This is great. But when you say I want monthly payments, then you have a goal behind that. The only way you get those monthly payments is if you say to the life insurance policy insurance company, I have created a trust and I want you to pay out that money into my trust. And the trust is a trustee will hold it for my child or my family member, and then they dole out so much money per month. I wholeheartedly agree with that because I look at it as parenting from the grave. I wouldn't hand any of my kids, I don't care how much I love them right now, $100,000, right? I just wouldn't. And so I would probably go, I'll give you this, a little bit of amount. And then as you get older, I see how you do, then I'll give you a little bit more. You can create those values and that kind of plan using a trust. So I always encourage that, as long as you feel pretty confident with, the decision-making that child has and, whatever values you want to encourage, give them the money directly. There's no reason to put somebody in between them though.
Yeah, because I'm not saying I don't trust his wife, his future wife, or so forth and so on. I just want to get my kid to be secure. I want that to be straight to him. That's my kid, not you and her and your.
Yeah. But you didn't say that you don't trust his future wife, and
I'm not saying that.
Not at all. Okay, but I'll say it though. So here's the deal. That is one more reason that we do trust, right? When I do not want to provide for your future ex-wife or your future ex-husband, I want to have a trust that says I keep as much money in this pot for my child as long as possible. Now, when it goes to my kids' hands, they do whatever they do with it. If they get that crazy ex-girlfriend or baby mama drama, they do with it as they please. But I'm just not going to hand it to them outright for them to be used however, So, but that is a regular discussion, and I kind of make people laugh, but I'm like, yeah, so how much do you like your kid? And then how much do you like your kid's girlfriend or boyfriend or whoever they're involved with?
Oh, so, let me get my thoughts because that was a good one. Oh, because you talked about trust, and here's the thing: just a basketball player, he was never married to the female down there. I guess in Miami, he passed away. He had but he had a trust set up. It went through the trustee, the money for the child, and then they found out she was blowing through the money like $10,000, $20,000 a month. Hair, nails, had nothing to do with the baby, and so the trustee stepped in and put a halt to her getting the money. So I think when you're looking at executors and trustees, you make sure you got to have somebody that's got a level deal when it comes to dealing with that money and those assets.
Absolutely.
And so I know you deal with that a lot. And so if you had 3 important things that you'd like to give out to people to say, hey, these are my 3 hard stops that you need to pay attention to in life as you build your estate, what would they be?
Yeah. Wow, I should have prepared for this better. I think the first one would be do what you can with where you are, right? So Mike, to your point earlier, you don't have that insurance policy yet. Well, you don't have to go get $1 million policy today. You go get $100,000 policy today, right? That's where you are. And I'm just making up stuff. I don't know anything about your background, but we don't always have to go provide for the rest of their life right away. We can start with just $100,000. And now I got you something that'll get you through college. So start where you are and just do what you can with what you have. And then, because that includes, not everybody's ready to go get that lawyer. So just start the process and then think about what's important. That means what's important to your family, right? If you want to make sure your kid has money for college, you want to make sure they have money to buy a house. If you want to encourage them to start a business, whatever those things are, those are the values that you are encouraging, right? And lastly, your legacy has already begun. I know I talk about this from saying that we're helping create a legacy, but you've already started. Your kids are watching, your family's watching. You're leaving an impression on the world today. So think about it in the sense of what those last impressions are, if that makes sense.
No, that makes great sense because of the legacy that we leave. And that's the one thing is I started after I retired from the military is that my daughters always said, Dad, you're doing podcasts, you're social media, you're doing this. I said, well, I'm leaving you a legacy. So you have this financial thing. Because I said, when you do my eulogy, I don't want you to have to struggle and say if my dad was a good man or a bad man. I said, I've sat through a couple eulogies and I was just waiting on fire and brimstone to come down because everybody was fabricating at the podium about the individual. I said, so the only thing I ever need you to say, kids, is that my dad was a good man. He wasn't perfect, but he was a good man and he provided. And so you're in the BNI network, business network of
Business Networking International.
International, there you go. And so tell me a little bit about that and how does that group help benefit your business and your organization? Cool. What you do.
Yep. So BNI is just one of many networking groups. It's very structured in terms of how you go about networking. You kind of create a chapter of people. Everybody has a specific profession. There is no overlap in terms of professions and what we advertise. So I stepped into BNI because it just helped give me a platform to network. When I started my practice, right along after I started that situation with my friend that I told you about when she passed away. So this business is relatively new. It kind of is an outgrowth of my friend passing away. And I had no intentions of ever starting a business. So BNI started that process for me with learning how to network, learning how to promote myself and market and do all of those things. So it's been one of those ways that I've done that. So
I see Lori Harper.
Exactly.
The BNI network.
Yeah. So, and like Lori for sure has helped me and she's done photos of different things and she connected me with you. So it has been a great way to kind of challenge and stretch myself And then I get to meet some really cool people along the way. So,
hey, you know what? When you get to meet the Mike G, the original OG of Tampa, Florida.
Okay.
Mike, you got anything before we get out here?
No, it's been great meeting you. I think I'm going to call you. I don't know. You got me all like, what? Might die tomorrow. Sorry, Gabriel. Shit. Damn.
There you go.
So I bookmarked your website. I was like, okay.
Oh, I appreciate it.
I got a call. No, I appreciate you. I mean, I've always thought about it, but it looks like something's like, all right, I'll do it. I'll get to it.
Yep.
And it's like, but life, takes a journey. It's like, oh, I got other things to do. But but you sit there and think, damn, I've seen this over and over and over. You got to buy the coffin. You got to buy this. You can't get a right autopsy. You got to get sued. You don't got nothing.
Yeah.
Everybody broke. Everybody like, what the fuck? Yo, I got 5 on it. We gotta get a shuffle of the money to bury you.
Exactly. GoFundMe for your funeral. Yeah.
Yeah. That's embarrassing.
But it happens, and it does.
It does.
It does. And so that's why I just say you start where you are, because even if you just start with, all right, well, maybe you just go get that funeral burial plan and get a plot. I'm not telling you have to do all of it, but that being said, Mike, I would welcome the opportunity to talk with you. I do speaking engagements, so you don't have to schedule a consultation. You can just show up at my next event and ask questions.
That's good stuff. And you write a blog too, because I wanted to cover that real quick for your church. So you got a spiritual side, you have, I guess your workout side, and then you have your business side. So from a spiritual standpoint, you write the blog. What's your blog based on? I know not Catholicism, but on Christianity. But why is it so important that you do that?
So I haven't done it in a little bit, but it is part of my church with Bay Life. It's Bay Life Church in Brandon. So one of the pastors wanted to start creating some information and just thought-provoking content. So I had the opportunity to be one of the more diverse voices there, because it is a group of diverse folks. And we all just kind of said, hey, what's going on in your world? What do you think God has been dealing with you or the people in your world about? And so there's been a couple of times that I've had the opportunity to write. I absolutely miss writing regularly, but that is one of those things that I do. And I just get to share the word of God on occasion with some folks. And that is, if I have to say anything, that is really one of the core beliefs behind what we do for estate planning. It is a version of stewardship. That's why you don't hear me talk high level. Let's talk about taxes. Let's talk about this. No, this is legacy. And if you're believing and following after Jesus, then you were given this stuff and you need to make a good plan to give it to the next person. Not to be overly preachy about anything, but that's, practice what you preach, basically.
Right, and if you really look at it, and if you and not into Christianity, I'm sorry, but I'm going to bring this out to everybody, is that if you look at the people in the Bible, they were always building legacy of their families, regardless who, be it Abraham, be it Joshua, be it Jacob. Everybody was always kind of building some kind of legacy. And Gheri Hicks, I appreciate you coming on today. This has been a great show, and we're like, whoa, this has been energy, man, energy.
Thank you.
Mike G always say, you have to keep that.